Hey guys, welcome back to Finance for Firefighters. A lot of episodes we've discussed really how small amounts of money has turned into large amounts over time, the importance of saving, investing, everything related to that. But today we're going to talk about really how compounding works. I think the concept of compounding and the exponential growth associated with it is a pretty simple concept, but really the value of it and some examples we'll look at will really illustrate to you why compounding makes a difference, and it should really reinforce the thought process of investing or saving your money or even thinking before spending money, and how that'll go will affect your finances. So when we're getting into talking about investing in exponential growth and compounding, the key concept to understand here is that time is the most valuable asset and the most valuable investment commodity that there is. It's not necessarily the amount invested. Yes, if you invest more, that'll make a bigger difference, but the actual time piece of it, the longer you have to invest, the more the growth will happen on the exponential aspect of things, and the more compounding will actually affect things. So we'll draw a parallel between compounding and exponential growth to, let's say, a fire growth, right? So for fire, for us, as long as there's fuel, as long as there's oxygen, and as long as there's a heat source, that fire will continue to grow. So if you dump more fuel on top of it, the fire will continue to grow. So if you think about that from an investment standpoint, the exponential growth of fire, just like the exponential growth of compounding, is the higher the interest rate, the longer the period of time, the more that the wealth will grow. Just like the more time that elapses from when a fire starts, the higher the exponential growth will be as a fire doubling in size. So if we think about the comparison between fire growth and exponential growth from investments, the fire growth, typically we see a cap out at that, right? But if we took some of the limitations away, we kept adding fuel to it, or we kept adding space for the fire to grow, the fire would just continue to grow. So if we think about that from a wealth standpoint, as long as you're putting more money into it, and as long as you're an investment, you're getting a rate of return on your investment, that money will continue to grow exponentially. Now we'll look at some examples comparing two different fictional firefighters and illustrate how the actual exponential growth will happen as time moves forward. So we'll take a 22-year-old and we'll take a 32-year-old, and we'll give different investment, the same investment amounts, but different periods of time, right, for that same for those two fictional folks, and see just really what the difference will be from what one will be able to do versus the other one, right? Starting at the age of 22 versus starting at the age of 32, how much of a difference even that small amount of 10 years will be. Even though the difference between a 22-year-old and a 32-year-old is only that 10 years, if you add that 10 years to the beginning part of your investment, the end result of that graph separating is significant. So we'll take a look at some examples illustrating those points. All right, so we got an initial investment of $0, and then we're going to do a monthly contribution of $500. We're saying this person's 22 years old, and they've done it for 10. They're investing it for 10 years at a 7% rate of return. So we can see the total amount they put in is 60 grand, and future contributions and interest brings it up to about 82. All right, so we said that the person invested for 10 years, and now they're at the age of 32, and they're going to stop investing, and we're going to add an additional 20 years on top of it. So they invested that $500 a month for that amount of time for the 10-year period. They ended up with 82 grand. Then they stopped contributing, and then we're going to add another 20 years to it and see what happens. So now at the end of that 20 additional years, their balance is going to be $320,000, right? So they invested $500 a month for 10 years. Then they stopped, and then 20 years they continued, and they still got that same rate of return based on the amount of money they put in there. So now we see this graph jumped way out there, right? We've got over, they've only really put in a little over 80,000 with their initial investments, but their amount over time has jumped up significantly, right? Now we'll run it again, and we'll look at it and we'll say, hey, this person has put in the $500 a month for that period of time, and they've done it for that entire 30 years, right? The 10 years initially, and then add the additional 20 years. It brings them up to over $550,000. All right, let's run another example. So now we're going to say this person's 32 years old, so they're going to have less time total to do it, but we're going to do the same amounts. We're going to say nothing at first, then they put in $500 a month. They did it for 10 years at 7%. They ended up with that same 82,000 because they had 10 years of doing it, so the same amount has gone in there, right? So now this 32-year-old is now 42. So we're starting at the age of 42. We're just moving that money, that number back out and see what's going to happen. So that 82,000 and change, we're putting in there as the initial investment now. saying that they're 42 now, and then we're going to match it out for another 10 years, right? So now they're 42 to the age of 52. They've only got 160,000 in there. You can still see that the initial amount they put in is 80,000, and it's basically doubled in that 10-year period, but it's definitely didn't drop up as much as the other one did, right? Now we'll add in the $500 a month, and we'll march that out and see exactly how far that did, right? So by doing that, we see that the amount of money jumped out there, said, hey, they did $500 a month from the age of 32 to the age of 42, and they had that $82,000 in change. And then we showed adding the additional $500 a month for the following 10 years. And now they're up to $245,000. So they've done $500 a month for that 20-year period, and they're at $245,000, which is significantly less than the initial firefighter who even just did that $500 a month for 10 years and then stopped. We're seeing a lot more money in here because they had 10 additional years early on to front load this, and that allowed the compounding interest to jump up huge. So now we'll add in some other numbers here and just extrapolate out what it would be for this firefighter to sort of catch up to what the other firefighter did. So we're going to say, hey, after the first 10 years, now the last 10 years, they're going to add $1,000 a month, right? What's that going to do? Instead of the 500, they're doing 1,000. So now their investments have grown more. You know, they went up to $328,000, which is still less than what that initial firefighter had done. And they're doing a lot more. And we'll throw in a little more money. We'll say, hey, they're able to do $1,500 a month for that last 10 years, right? So now because they've only had 20 years worth of investing, they did the $500 a month, the same amount. This amount now is it's only up to $411,000. So if we look at these two different examples, the firefighter who's 22 versus the firefighter who's 32, the fact that the 22-year-old firefighter, let's assume they both retire at the age of 52, the 22-year-old firefighter had 30 years worth of investment, 30 years of compounding interest that they could capitalize on, right? The 32-year-old firefighter is still tapped out at that 20 years of investing, right? They're 32 when they start, they retire at 52. They still only have 20 years worth of investing. So even if they're dumping more money into the end, on the back end of it, it makes such a small difference. The amount of money they're doing makes such a small change in it versus the time period part of it, right? So we see the more time you have, the more that money grows. And I think that this illustration of the compounding interest or the compound or the exponential growth makes such a huge illustration about why you got to get started early. Even if it's a small amount of money, get started early. It'll make a huge difference over time. All right, now we're going to take a look at an example of starting small and just see what that does over a period of time, right? So say you have nothing you're starting with, you're putting $100 in and you're doing it for 30 years at 7%. It ends up being about $113,000 at the end of 30 years. All right, small amount, $100 a month. Most of us would be able to free up $100 a month pretty easily. Now let's march it out and just say we're going to increase it over time. Let's say, hey, we do it and we're going to invest $100 a month for the first 5 years. What's that going to look like? Okay, $100 a month for the first 5 years. We're going to push that out and see what that does, and then how much you'll have at the end of that, right? So that ends up bringing in about $6,000. Now we're going to increase our amounts every 5 years. So we'll say, hey, we got $6,900 and change. And then we're going to increase our contribution to $200 a month and see what that does. We'll do that for the next 5 years. All right. So now at the end of 10 years, 5 years plus 5 years, at the end of 10 years, we got $23,000, right? Invested 18 up to $23,000. Now we're going to throw that in there and increase our contributions again. So, okay, a little over $23,000. We're going to bump our contributions up to about $300 a month. Add it for another 5 years, see what happens. All right, went up to $53,000. March it out again, see what happens. Put our initial amount back in there, that changes again. And then we're going to increase our monthly contribution to $400 a month. Do it for another 5 years. Balance is $102,000. March it out again, so the initial investment changes to $102,000 and change. Monthly contribution is going to go up to $500 a month. Run it again. $178,000. Okay. The graph is starting to separate. More exponential growth is happening. Longer period of time. All right, so we put the 178 into initial investment, and we're going to increase our contribution by another $100 a month. So at the end of this, you got $292,000, right? So if we look at that over a 30-year career, if we just did the $100 a month, we're ending with about $113,000. And then in this way, we're saying, hey, every 5 years, we're able to free up another $100 a month. What does that do for us over the long term? Well, by doing another $100 a month over the long term, we're ended up, significantly increasing it by almost triple by doing that, right? So if you look at it if I just do a small amount, I'm going to have a big chunk of money later. But if I'm able to free up more as time goes on, the more I can do earlier, the better it is for me. So if that looks like, hey, I can free up some extra overtime shifts, I can throw half an overtime shift at that, and I can bring the monthly contribution amount up. Or even if it was just a one-time couple grand extra you throw in there, the more you do earlier, the significant impact it'll have on that exponential growth later. The more that money will separate from the amount you put into it. So use time for to your advantage. The more you can do now, the more you can free things up, the more it'll make a difference for you in the future. Through some of these examples, we're really going to be able to visualize how much that growth builds over time. It's really the time element of it. It's not the amount of money invested. Even with small amounts of money invested, the longer the time is that you have, the more that will grow. So if we look at a brand new firefighter with much less disposable income than a 45 or 50-year-old guy who's maybe paid off bills or house or promoted or had all these other things, and that other person's maybe paying off debt and is really trying to work towards saving for a house and things like that, just investing that small amount really early on will make a huge difference at the end result when you're fast forward in 20 or 30 years. So we can look at these examples in a few different ways. One of them is you're using them as a brokerage account, as a short-term or long-term savings, or even wealth building in the future, right? But the other one we could look at really, or the first one to start with, would be your 457 or your additional retirement income contributions. If you are waiting on contributing to your 457 until you have more disposable income, don't wait. Every year that you push it off is going to basically shrink that curve at the further end, right? You're reducing the amount of time. So even if you're starting with $50 a check or $100 a check, you do that stuff early now, and as promotions happen and as step increases, or you get education incentive pay or raises, whatever those things happen over time, start with that small amount you do now, and just continue to increase it if you can. Keep it the same, but increase it if you can. And as time marches out, that 457 will grow significantly, and then that other brokerage account you have will grow significantly. And by having those two things set up in place, now you're not relying on a pension system, which is a public system, right? If things change, votes happen, there's recessions, other things like that negatively affect the pension side, then you are still in much better shape. If we look back even pretty recently to 2013, not that long ago, switching between classic to Pepper members, right? There's definite differences in that benefit that those folks have. Currently there's an income cap that you can have. You have to work significantly longer to attain higher maximums and things like that. So don't rely on the pension part of it. If you can do this stuff now early and have the foresight to look at it, you're going to make a huge difference for your wealth in the future and the security of your family as a result of it. I encourage you to look ahead or look at what you have now, plan out and sort of extrapolate where you are and where you could be in the future by just running some basic numbers through that compound interest calculator, and have an idea of what you're looking at. If you're 20-year-old now, or 30 or 40 or whatever, start with the initial amount you have in that savings. If it's nothing, it's nothing. And then have the annual amounts or the monthly amounts you're doing, and then look at how far that's out. Plug in your numbers for how many years you have left, or when you're planning on retiring, things like that, and you'll be able to see exactly what you're at. And then make small modifications. Say, hey, can I free up $50 more check, or $100 or $500 more check, whatever you can do to be able to invest in either the brokerage account or the 457, you're going to see significant changes for that growth in the future. So tying it back into the analogy we have with fire growth, a fire starts small, and if fuel's added to it, if oxygen's there, if there's not a limited amount of space, that fire will continue to grow exponentially. So obviously we want to put the fire out, but for the financial side of it, if we're investing and we're using compounding interest and we're adding more to it, that amount of growth we're going to see is huge, right? So on the wealth side, obviously we want that to grow and become significantly more than what it is. But think of it from that aspect of it. If you're wanting that fire or that financial wealth to grow, the more you put into it, the more fuel you have on there, the more money you're putting into it, the more the interest rate is, the more oxygen it has, the more that amount is going to be growing in that account. I encourage you folks to start today. Use some of the tools we have here. Look at previous episodes to sort of map out what you want to do. But even if it's a small amount now, start now, increase as much as you can comfortably, and continue to build your wealth over time. Thanks for joining me today on Finance for Firefighters. Hope you guys have a good shift. Leave a comment below if you have anything. Thumbs up if you like it. I'll see you guys in the next one.